They threw my son away like he was trash. The words, spoken through unimaginable grief by Donna Ayers, mother of Calvin Jones, encapsulate the 49-week nightmare of searching for her child. It was a search born from a loving father's inexplicable disappearance, a search that ended in the horrifying discovery of his remains in a desolate ravine. It marked the tragic, brutal end to the life of a devoted father and a beloved friend, and the beginning of a murder investigation that remains shrouded in chilling mystery. This is the story of what happened to Calvin Jones. To understand the depth of the tragedy, one must first understand the man who was lost. Calvin "Bub" Jones was, by every account, the bedrock of his family. At 37 years old, he was a dedicated single father to 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who were the absolute center of his world. He wasn't just a provider. He was their emotional anchor, their biggest cheerleader, and their constant source of love and stability. In the summer of 2024, Calvin was on the cusp of one of his proudest moments as a father. His eldest daughter was about to turn 18 and was preparing to head off to college, a milestone that filled him with immense joy. He had been meticulously planning a huge celebration for her, a party set for the evening of August 21st. It was an event, his family would later state with heartbreaking certainty, that he would never, ever miss. For a man so deeply woven into the fabric of his family's daily life, the idea of him voluntarily walking away was simply unthinkable. This stability was reflected in his professional life as well. For nearly a decade, Calvin was a familiar and welcome face at Giorgio's Oven Fresh Pizza in Brooklyn Heights, Ohio. He wasn't just an employee, he was part of the Giorgio's family. His colleagues and managers described him as a model worker, dependable, hardworking, and possessing a cheerful disposition that made the long hours of a demanding job feel lighter. His nearly 10-year tenure at the same job spoke volumes about his character. It painted a picture of a man with a well-ordered life, a man who found contentment in routine and responsibility, not one who was seeking escape or harboring secrets that would compel him to vanish. He was a man grounded in his community and his commitments. His personality was the kind that drew people in. Friends and family universally described him as outgoing, fun-loving, and, perhaps most critically to his case, exceptionally trusting. Calvin saw the good in people, a quality that endeared him to many, but may have also made him vulnerable. In the time leading up to his disappearance, he had entered into a new relationship. While details about his new girlfriend have remained largely private, it was a facet of his life that both his family and investigators took a keen interest in after he went missing. This portrait of Calvin Jones, a loving father, a reliable employee, a trusting friend, makes his final, violent hours all the more incomprehensible. He was a man living a life of purpose and love, a life that gave no indication it was about to be so cruelly cut short. The timeline of Calvin's disappearance is a chilling puzzle, a sequence of mundane moments that quickly spiral into a sinister mystery. The evening of August 20th, 2024, began like any other workday. Around 10 p.m., Calvin made his final pizza delivery of the night. In a touching display of his fatherly devotion, that last delivery was to his own home for his own children. It was a simple, loving act that would become one of their final memories of him. After the delivery, he returned to the pizzeria. At approximately 11:30 p.m., the surveillance cameras at Giorgio's Pizza captured his image for the last time as he finished his duties. 10 minutes later, around 11:40 p.m., he had a brief phone call with his son. The conversation was normal, unremarkable, with no hint of distress or alarm in his voice. It was the last confirmed contact anyone in his family would ever have with him. What happened in the hours that followed is known only to his killer. The first clue that something was terribly wrong emerged in the early morning hours of August 21st. A neighbor's home security camera captured a pivotal and deeply disturbing piece of evidence. At a time when Calvin should have been home asleep, his car, a silver Chevrolet Impala, was seen pulling up and stopping in front of his house. It remained there for just 51 seconds before driving away. The most crucial detail of this footage, later confirmed by police, was a fact that sent a wave of ice through the investigation. The person behind the wheel was not Calvin Jones. Someone else was driving his car, making a silent, ominous stop outside the home where his children slept. The car's mysterious journey continued throughout the day. Around 11:30 a.m., a traffic camera on Broadway Avenue recorded the silver Impala heading west. 2 hours later, at approximately 1:30 p.m., Calvin's cell phone emitted its final signal, pinging a cell tower also located on Broadway Avenue, in the Bedford area. After that, the phone went silent, permanently severed from the network. As the afternoon wore on, a sense of dread began to creep into the Jones family. The centerpiece of the day, the 18th birthday party for his daughter, was set to begin. But Calvin, the proud father who had planned it all, never showed up. The moment he missed that party, his family knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a man who had lost track of time. Something was horribly, catastrophically wrong. They immediately contacted the police and reported him missing. The 49 weeks that followed were a descent into a special kind of hell reserved for the families of the missing. It was a period defined by a desperate, relentless search fueled by a mother's love and a community's compassion. The family's first move was to harness the power of social media, creating a Facebook page, Finding Calvin Jones, which quickly became a central hub for updates, prayers, and calls for help. It was a digital beacon of hope in a sea of uncertainty. The physical effort was just as intense. Thousands of flyers bearing Calvin's smiling face and the details of his car were printed and plastered across Cleveland and its surrounding suburbs. His image was on gas station doors, community bulletin boards, and telephone poles, a silent plea for information. The family, led by the unwavering strength of his mother, Donna Ayers, refused to let the world forget him. They organized prayer vigils, bringing the community together to share in their hope and their pain. They also mounted large-scale physical searches, gathering volunteers to comb through the very areas where his car was last seen. Teams of determined friends, family, and even strangers trudged through parks, vacant lots, and the wooded areas lining the roads his Impala had traveled, searching for any sign, any clue, no matter how small. They were looking for a car, a piece of clothing, anything that could lead them to Calvin. Throughout this agonizing ordeal, Donna Ayers became a powerful public voice for her son. She appeared on local news broadcasts, her face etched with a pain that was palpable through the screen, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. Her plea was always the same, a direct appeal to the conscience of anyone who might be listening. "Somebody knows where my son is," she would say, looking directly into the camera. "Please, just tell us. Just let us bring him home." Her words were a raw and desperate cry for a basic human decency she hoped still existed in the person or people who held the key to her son's whereabouts. But her pleas were met with a terrifying, deafening silence. Despite the widespread media coverage, the thousands of flyers, and the exhaustive ground searches, nearly a year passed without a single credible lead. The silver Impala seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. No one called with a tip that panned out. The silence was more than just an absence of information. It was an active torment, a void that allowed the family's worst fears to grow and fester. Every day without news was another day that the mystery deepened, and the hope of finding Calvin alive dwindled, replaced by a gnawing dread of the truth they might one day have to face. The horrifying truth was finally revealed on July 30th, 2025, nearly a full year after Calvin vanished. The discovery was made not by a planned search party, but by a survey crew working in a wooded area in Cleveland. Near the intersection of 91st Street and Cannon Avenue, they stumbled upon a grim scene. There, in a steep, overgrown ravine, partially concealed by the dense foliage, were human remains. In a tragic twist of fate, the location was an area that Calvin's family and friends had searched themselves multiple times in the preceding months. The terrain was so treacherous and the woods so thick that his body had remained hidden from their desperate eyes, just out of sight. They had been so close, yet so agonizingly far. The condition of the remains presented immediate challenges for investigators. After nearly a year of exposure to the elements, the body was severely decomposed. The task of identification fell to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office, which had to rely on dental records to make a positive confirmation. The result confirmed the family's worst fears. The remains belonged to Calvin Jones. the state of his body also made determining an exact cause of death incredibly difficult, a fact that added another layer of pain for his loved ones. They were warned by the authorities that the condition was such that an open casket funeral would be impossible, robbing them of the chance to see their beloved son, brother, and father one last time. With the discovery of his body, the case officially shifted. It was no longer a missing person investigation. It was now a homicide, and the case was handed over to the Cleveland Police Homicide Unit. The long, agonizing question of where had been answered in the most brutal way imaginable. Now, the equally agonizing questions of who and why began. With the investigation now focused on finding a killer, several key theories have emerged, each attempting to explain the sequence of events that led to Calvin's death. Each theory is a maze of possibilities, weighed down by the few chilling facts the police have and the many questions that remain unanswered. The first and perhaps most straightforward theory is that of a robbery gone horribly wrong. In this scenario, Calvin, working late as a pizza delivery driver, became a target of opportunity. The assailant's primary motive would have been to steal his car, cash, and phone. The murder itself might not have been premeditated. It could have been the result of a panicked robber or a struggle that escalated to lethal violence. The primary evidence supporting this theory is the fact that his car was indeed taken and driven by someone else. Delivery drivers are often seen as vulnerable targets, and a late-night encounter could have easily turned deadly. However, this theory has a significant weakness: the killer's behavior with the car. Why would a car thief, after committing a murder, drive the victim's vehicle around the city for hours the next day? Why make that brazen, 51-second stop directly in front of Calvin's home? This action seems more personal, more calculated than the panicked flight of a typical robber who would likely dump the vehicle as quickly as possible to sever their connection to the crime. This leads to the second, and what many believe to be the most plausible theory: a personal conflict and a devastating betrayal. This scenario suggests that Calvin was killed by someone he knew and, crucially, someone he trusted. The killer, or killers, may have lured him to a specific location under false pretenses. An argument or a pre-existing dispute could have erupted, leading to his murder. The person who trusted others so easily may have walked willingly into a trap set by a supposed friend or acquaintance. This theory gains significant weight from the killer's audacious behavior. Driving the victim's car to the victim's own house feels like a taunt, a chilling message, or perhaps a reckless check to see if anyone was home or aware of what had happened. It speaks to a level of arrogance and familiarity that a random attacker would be unlikely to possess. Calvin's trusting nature becomes a tragic vulnerability in this context. Furthermore, his new romantic relationship, while not publicly detailed, represents a potential source of conflict. Jealousy, a rival, or some other unknown dispute connected to it could have been the catalyst. A third theory posits that Calvin was the victim of a dangerous, random encounter entirely separate from his work or personal life. He could have arranged to meet someone, perhaps through a social media app or for a private sale, that went terribly wrong. It's also possible that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time and witnessed a crime in progress, something he was never meant to see. The perpetrators would have then killed him to silence him, disposing of his body to cover their tracks. The deliberate way his body was hidden in a remote ravine supports the idea of a calculated cover-up. The weakness of this theory, however, is the complete lack of evidence suggesting Calvin was involved in any kind of high-risk or illicit activity. His life, by all accounts, was stable and transparent. While possible, this scenario remains pure speculation without any information to connect him to such a dangerous world. These theories swirl around a core of haunting, unanswered questions that torment his family and challenge investigators. Who was the person seen driving Calvin's Chevrolet Impala on the morning of August 21st? Identifying this individual is likely the single most important key to solving the case. What was the true motive behind this ruthless murder? Was it for a car, a result of jealousy, or to silence a witness? What exactly happened in the dark hours between his last phone call at 11:40 p.m. And the moment his body was discarded like trash in that ravine? And finally, was this the act of one person, or were multiple people involved in his murder and the subsequent cover-up? Someone out there is holding the truth, their silence compounding a family's unending grief. Until they are found, justice for Calvin Jones remains agonizingly out of reach. The search for Calvin Jones is over, but the fight for justice has just begun. His children are growing up without their father, and his mother is left with only memories and the burning question of who took her son from her. The person or people responsible for this heinous act are still out there. If you have any information, no matter how small or insignificant you think it might be, please come forward and leave a comment below. Your engagement helps the algorithm push this story to more people, increasing the chances that it reaches the one person who knows something. Thank you for listening.